Okay, go.
Okay, I guess I'm going to take it away since I have this on my screen. So we'll hope that everything works the way it should. So first of all, I should start out by saying that I just found out the other night that Steve Port was also a sailor. So we're going to have to swap some sea stories at some point, I think. So, but tonight we're going to talk about I called it the Great Editing Challenge. And the way this came about was during the winter, Steve and I had some conversations about critiquing photos and so on. And at one point, Steve sent me a link to a video. And in a second, I'll let Steve talk a little bit more about that video. But it was a video done by a couple of gentlemen who I believe teach photography classes online and do webinars and that sort of thing. And one of the things in the video that they did was to take some work that had been done by other people, and they went ahead and edited it. Is that too many didits in there? I think did some editing, and then they compared the results. And I told Steve that really sounded like a fun activity that we might want to try. So I got in touch with Jim also, and he decided he'd like to have at it also. So that's how we came about. And I don't know, the video is kind of blocking part of the screen here. So I'm not sure if there's a way to get that out of there or not. But anyway, the quote on the screen really kind of applies to what we're doing here is that, everybody can take photos of different scenes, but then how you see it and what you do with it really does improve the image, gives you a chance to put your own personality into the work and so on. So Steve, would you like to just talk real briefly about the gentleman that we talked about, and then we'll talk about how we did this and go into the results.
You betcha. I love following certain people on YouTube because, in general, most of them are just top shelf photographers themselves. They're teachers. They do trips and training and all sorts of things. But they get requests from the people that follow them all the time they want to send them a picture and say, what do you think of this? And so they came up with this thing, and their names are Alistair Ben and Adam Gibbs. Neither one of them are from this country. Adam Gibbs is Canadian, and Alistair Ben, I think, maybe Scottish. And but they have huge followings, and so they decided to take a few pictures. Each of them edited them independently, and then they sit there and compared notes about each one of them did. And the thing that caught my attention is that sometimes they did the same things, but often they went entirely different directions. And if you think that there's only one way that the best of the best view a photograph, you'd find out that that is absolutely wrong. That each person has his own interpretation of what it is that's before him. So why this exercise? It's different than a critique. It invites real creativity, and but it has a requirement. You got to start with good bones on a photograph in order to have a good result. You can't create something from nothing. You got to have a decent composition and some potential for viewer impact. And then you, the person on the keyboard, get to find out a way to make it pop.
Okay, thank you, Steve. So what the challenge involved then was we had a image donor, and as Steve said the other night, we'll do the big reveal at the end and talk about who gave us these images. But each one of us got the same raw images, and then each person in the group, each one of us, edited the image in the different ways that we saw the potential. And as you can see here, various editing programs were used. So we're probably not going to get into a lot of detail on the nitty gritty of what we did with different software items, but talk kind of in general. But the different programs used between the three of us, and there might have even been one I missed here, Photoshop on one, Topaz, Affinity Photo, which is what I've been using recently. As I mentioned, or as Evie mentioned, I came out of the dark room and got back into photography and did the digital stuff. And I had a Macintosh computer, and a friend said, "Oh, you should use Aperture." Well, that computer finally started to die, and I needed somewhere to go. So a friend suggested Affinity. So I kind of took it on as my COVID project for the winter to learn some different software packages. And when Steve talked about doing this editing challenge, I said, "Yeah, this would be fun." So I do use Affinity, Lightroom, Luminar 4, Photomatix is another one I use. We didn't share our results until everyone had completed the editing process. And then we did get together and talk about what we had done and kind of put the program together. So the 4 raw images that we worked with are on the screen. And as you can see, each one very interesting photos. So we thought they had some potential. And at this point, we're just going to share what each one of us did with them. What we'll do is go through each image and each of us will show the results, and then we'll go back to the next one. So the first image, Jim is going to talk about what he did with this image, and then we'll move on. So Jim, you can take it over.
Are you gonna show mine next, or?
Yeah, do you want to talk
Yeah.
about the raw image, what you saw first in it, and
Yeah.
then kind of go on? Let me know when you need to have me advance.
I'll just go to my photograph. I guess
Okay.
that'd be the easiest way.
All
So as you saw on the first slide, this is my end results that I came up with on this one. I did the normal. First of all, I use On1 software, and if I need to do any sharpening or I use the Topaz package. And with those particular type of things, noise or sharpening or whatever. On this one, I just used On1. I did the normal processing, the tone and color. And then I also use a Lux category of moody on the photograph. And I masked out the road and also the sky. And so the moody effect was of the grain and of the hills. And so I enhanced the skies on this particular photograph, and this is my end result here.
Okay, you all set, Jim?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
On
I'm
this
awesome.
one. Okay, now go back to the original raw image so you can compare again. And we're going to talk about what I did next. And this really was right down my alley. I love taking photos of barns. Maybe it's because of the last name Barneveld, I'm not sure. But anyway, they're one of my favorite subjects. So I initially looked at it, and probably most of you realize I also like to dabble with HDR. I thought about doing some HDR on this, but decided not to. I love the composition, but the fence kind of bothered me. The metal posts there kind of felt like I was blacked out of the photo, is the feeling I got. And I did notice the leading lines from the road and the piles of wheat or grain or straw or whatever that might be. So this is what I ended up doing with the image. I started out using Affinity and did some burning and dodging, first of all, generally, and then I used the clone tool to get rid of the fence line that was on the left side of the photo. I also did some sharpening. I put down a gradient layer to kind of soften. I always kind of have problems with editing this type of scene with grass or weeds growing. I like to try to bring those down if I can a little bit. Then I also, after I did the initial processing, the other thing I tried to do, notice the tractor over on the right-hand side. I wanted to bring that out and make that also part of the image so it stood out a little more. From Affinity, I went into Luminar and I did a sky replacement. And luckily, while I was working, some birds flew into the scene there, so I let them stay. And the other thing I did with Luminar was, you might notice, and I'm not sure if you can see my mouse pointer or not, but right in this area, I did pop a sun in that was below the horizon, and it just added kind of a nice lighting effect to it. So that's what I saw in the same image. So Steve, we'll let you go next.
Well, I like to stare at the original raw images for a while and just let my mind soak in there. And I was very taken with the image because, and I asked myself why I liked it. And I realized that it really stuck very closely to the rule of thirds. The barn is in a quadrant. The horizon is not centered. Then I recognized that there were all these leading lines pointing at the barn. We had the road, we had the fence, we had the hay, and then coming down the mountains to the barn. So the barn and its accessories there are really the central point. And so I decided that it really had the basis to do some stuff with it. And there's things that when you're editing and you watch these guys online and what they do, they're always talking about some of the basic editing things. And that is, if you have a lot of dark shadows, if there's any content that you want to coax out of there, so you bring out the shadows, you try and knock down any highlights that may be too bright. And then, so if we go to mine, I then added some contrast to the whole thing. I decided that in my mind's eye, it was getting toward late in the day. So I wanted to warm up the whole scene and make it as fallish as I could to match the time of the year. And looking at the original, I thought, gee, I wish I could do something to put some drama in that sky. And so I went out and dropped in a sky that had a setting sun that had lots of drama to it. So I was trying my best to give the picture as much impact as I could give it and warm it up for a real fall feeling.
Okay, all set, Steve?
Yep.
Okay, this is our second image. And Jim, do you want to have me leave this up, or do you want to go right to yours?
Yeah, just go right to mine.
Let's, can we pause just a minute? Does anybody have any questions of the three for the first image?
Yeah, I do. How did you get the light to come through the open, Steve and Russ, both has light coming through the barn, the broken barn wood. What did you use to do that?
Nothing, the light was already there, Jeannie. You just had to crank up the burner.
I didn't notice it so much in the original.
Oh, it's there.
Yeah, there's the original, Gene.
Where's yours, Russ?
There's mine.
You have a lot more light coming through.
On mine, I did quite a bit of dodging on this just to lighten it up and bring the texture out a little more, which also brought up the light. Now that I look at it, I probably should have colored in the portion of it so it looked like you could see the grass. But so that answer your question, Gene?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, good.
Anybody else have a question? All right, Jeannie, could you mute yourself again, and then we'll let them go on to their next image.
I have a question, Ned Hughes.
Yes.
Russ, you took out the fence on the left. I was wondering why you didn't also take out the telephone pole.
Good question. In fact, when I looked at the presentation this afternoon just to see what I had done, I said that to myself, why didn't I take out the telephone pole? I probably, if I were going to go back and do some more editing on this, yeah, I'd probably get rid of the telephone pole also. Telephone poles and wires really bug me. So I think maybe I was doing so much cloning to get rid of the fence that I think I just didn't think of it.
On my original photograph, I actually tried to get rid of the fence, and I was having issues with it, so I just left it. I did try originally. Try to get rid of it.
Okay, so James, there you go.
On mine, I wanted to make the reflection pop in the photograph. So what I did was normal processing, and I did HDR look and also dynamic contrast. I added that into the photograph, and I am a little gray-green colorblind, and so the trees over on the far right, they're a little bit more green than they probably should be, just because of my eyesight. But so that's the reason why it looks a little bit more green. The other thing that I did, the left-hand side of the lower part of the screen, and also the mountains on the left, I did some masking here to try to bring these guys out a little bit more. And so this is what I did to this photograph. I also added some contrast, and I also added some structure to it to get a little bit more sharpening into the photograph.
Okay, good. All set, Jim?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. I love this image. I wish I had taken it myself, actually. And when I looked at it, Evie mentioned that I was in the camera club back in the early 70s. And at that time, Joe Timmer, if any of you are really old timers like I am, might remember Joe being in the club, one of the top photographers in the club. And whenever he judged, especially if it was a water scene, he would always say, well, you know, it's a great image, but too bad there isn't a red canoe out there. And that kind of struck me. But anyway, what I did with the image, my HDR tendencies kicked in, and I actually ran the raw image through Affinity Photo and did some bracketing. I actually came up with 5 different images, one, the exposure right on, and then 2 stops under, 2 stops over, and then put this into Photomatrix, or Photomatics, I'm sorry, to make the HDR image. And then I did bring it back into Affinity. And a couple things I did, I cropped and got rid of well, you can see it here, the little point on the rock and some of the shrubbery that's in the front, and just made it more of a panoramic sort of image. Then I did some dodging and burning, brought up the clarity a little bit. And the sky is the original sky. I didn't pop a new sky in, but again, what I did was I used the cloning tool to spread out those clouds across the sky. And then once I'd done that, I realized I really should do this same sort of thing to the reflection in the water. So I used the cloning tool to kind of match the cloud image on this. So then I also added just a slight vignette. So that's what I did on this particular image. And Steve, by the way, as I was looking at it, I could picture Ansel Adams sitting out there with his big view camera. So I also popped the image back into Affinity and just did a conversion to black and white. So or monochrome. So I'm kind of tossed up between the two, which I really preferred better. But again, with editing, it is very easy to go from the color over to the monochrome image. So, okay, Steve.
Okay, well, as I was letting it soak in its unabashed raw state, I love the clouds up above the peaks. I love the reflection in there. I love the setting of the lake. I just loved everything about it. And I just asked myself, okay, what could I do to take it to the next level? Advance. So I did the normal extracting details out of the deep shadows and knocking down some of the highlights. I wanted to increase those photo colors there, the forest colors there in the trees, because I thought it not what I assume might, well, I don't know whether it's early morning or late afternoon, but that low sun angle there really fired up the mountain, and I loved it. So I thought I should give it a little saturation help there. The sky, you could tell, was really good, but it needed a little kick. So a little color boost and saturation there. Go back, Russ. Okay, you look at a raw file, and I'm probably preaching to the choir here. Everybody listening probably knows all of this, but I thought it bared a little focus. Raw files start off pretty dull and uninteresting. And they're seldom, though, what you actually saw with your eyes when you were there. You looked at the back of the camera after you took your raw file, and you said, boy, that looks pretty good. And the reason it looked pretty good on the back of your camera is that's not a raw file. The camera translates it into a JPEG because you really actually can't see the data in raw. It has to have some interpretation by some processor in between. So you look at your JPEG, you think it's good, you get to your computer, and you're back to duh. The raw file itself is just a massive pile of pixels, potential, awaiting some post-processing interpretation.
Okay, all set, Steve?
Yep.
Okay, good. Okay, here's our next image.
All right, before we go on,
Yes.
let's see if anybody has any questions. You do, you can unmute yourself and chime in. Nope. Okay, no
Okay.
questions, so go right ahead.
All right, here's our next image. And Jim, do you want to talk on this, or do you want your edited?
This particular photograph looked, as you can see, it's pretty raw or kind of flat on this particular photograph. And there's a lot of grays into this photograph. So I decided, go ahead to the next photograph, is that I went and I kicked up the temperature on this particular photograph to show more of the browns. The other thing that I did with this photograph is I cropped it to a 16:9 format. And then I took the horizon, which was up a little bit higher in the photograph, the original photograph, and I put it right smack dab in the center of the photograph so that, well, maybe a little bit higher so that I show more of the shore than of the sky. And I didn't really care for the sky, the way it was. There was some texture, as you saw in there. So what I did was that I went and I smoothed out the sky so that there wasn't, it's like a more of a not a foggy, but it's just gray cloud type of a process. And so again, I kicked up the temperature. I added a lot of contrast and structure to the photograph. I also added some dynamic contrast to the photograph. And then, as I said, is that I masked out the sky and I just basically just made it a little bit more plain on this particular photograph. I'm not the greatest of an artist yet. So this was just kind of a typical, okay, here's what I ended up or thought that was going to be a halfway decent photograph.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you, James. All right, back to the original. And this particular photo, I really love this one also. I wish I'd taken it actually, but when we do the big reveal, we'll find out who actually did this one. Great shot. I love the composition on it. And looking at it, I actually said, wow, if this were mine, I could actually have two different photos out of it. So I'll show you what I did with that part of it also. But this is what I ended up with. Basically, I just adjusted some of the exposure, black point, highlight, shadows, and I did like the clouds in the sky, but they weren't popping necessarily. So I did some burning basically just to bring out the texture in the sky and so on, and then did a lot of work in the bottom right hand corner, actually the whole bottom of the photo, to bring out the pebbles, the texture in the water, and actually the little bit of reflection that we get there also. So pretty straightforward processing on this. I mentioned that I really saw two images. I could have done that also, just kind of get rid of the pebbles altogether and just do a nice panoramic with it. Or I really loved the pebbles and the water around there. So we could have had a second image from this one. So Steve, here you go.
I was also very taken with this image when I saw it. It's a part of the country that I have not visited yet, and I've really got the itch to go there. I've seen so many people online get fabulous pictures from this area. It's a good one to talk about landscape in general. A lot of people, when they're teaching about it, they talk about developing a foreground interest, and we have these pebbles right there in front. It's a good lead into the picture. And then they talk about a mid-ground, and that reflection and that sand and all of that, and the rocks and trees and all of that just makes a wonderful mid-ground. And then the background sky back there, well, it needed a little ambush makeover here. So if we can go to mine, I kind of turned the burner up on high here, and again went for kind of that later in the day look. I think this is on the West Coast, so it's probably not. It might be sunrise, but it looks more like late in the day to me. But I warmed it up in there, and I did some saturation and brought out some detail in the trees and the rocks and the color. And I decided that it needed a glorious sky. So I went and found another sky and dropped that in there, and it just looked to me like it was whipped cream on a great pumpkin pie.
Okay, good. Maybe you and I should hop on a boat and sail out there, Steve, and go take some photos. Okay, all set with that one, Steve?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Any questions?
Any questions? Yes.
This is Van. I got a question there. I'm not sure about the two prior, but Steve, it looks like you removed what looked like maybe were a couple of people that were way out there just to the right of the big mound.
What people?
There you go.
That's just an illusion. They weren't really.
Yeah, okay. I thought it looked like something was missing there from the raw image there. So
Now, remember, this isn't photojournalism. We're not trying to faithfully recreate anything. This is the image that developed in my head.
there you go.
So my job on the computer is to make what's on my screen look like what I see in my head.
Yeah,
And
no,
in
that's
my
what I
head,
would have done too.
there's no people.
Steve, was the sky that you dropped in, was it one that you had taken a picture of, or was it one that you found elsewhere?
It was something that I got elsewhere.
Okay, just curious.
I would hate to show people what's in my head sometime. So
Jeannie, did you have a question?
No, I just said if they're gonna sail, I want to go along.
we'll set up an excursion
You know
here.
what? I've never been on a sailboat in my entire life. I'd like to someday, but the clock is ticking.
Yeah,
Well, a few days
careful
ago,
what
it would have been a good day out on Lake Michigan.
Oh, yeah.
be careful what you wish for, Jeannie.
Yeah.
Okay, so if there are no further questions of the panel, then Russ, forge ahead.
All right, here we go. All right, this is the last image that we worked with. So Jim, do you want this one, or do you want to go right to yours?
Well, actually, before we go to mine, I like this particular photograph with the waves here, and I wanted to emphasize, or I wanted to bring up the waves up in the foreground. That's the part of the photograph that I liked at this time. So go ahead and go to the next photograph. So what I did with this photograph is that I cropped it to 16:9, and I took the horizon and brought it up at the top of the 2/3 of the photograph so that I could show more of the water in the foreground. I did some sharpening in the foreground so that the waves came out. I did also did a lens correction using my On1 software. The other thing that I did with this photograph is that I used a LUTs filter, and the category was a Death Valley filter to bring the waves out, bring it up a little bit. And so that's all that I did with this photograph. Nothing else.
Okay, thank you. All right, back to this one. Again, I love this shot, being a sailor, anything deals with the ocean, I really love. I love the wave action in it, and the way it was composed. It actually reminded me of, we did some sailing in the British Virgin Islands, and there's a spot called the Indians, and just reminds me of my visit to the Indians and scuba diving at that area and so on. So by the way, this fourth image, we started out with 3 images a piece, and we met and talked about what we had done to them and everything. And I guess we kind of decided we were having so much fun that we would do a 4th one. So that's how we ended up with this one. And being the last image, I think I figured, well, what the heck, let's go for broke on it. So this is what I came up with. I started out by doing some cropping, and the horizon was just a bit off. So I did some straightening and did the cropping, brought out the waves with some sharpening, dodging and burning, and then popped in a new sky in Luminar. And you'll notice those same birds that had flown into my first scene somehow made it all the way over to the West Coast, I guess, and showed up in this one. The other thing I added in Luminar, and again, I'm not sure if you can see my pointer or not, but I did pop a sun in, again, just below the horizon, and then had it bring, or I brought some sun rays out that just barely are visible, and I figured, well, what the heck, let's make it a stormy night too, and put some lightning in there. So this is my take on that particular image. So Steve.
Yeah, what can I say? You get all revved up with all this cool software, and sometimes you just gotta let it rip. But sometimes when I look at a photo, and this is later in the day, and it's starting to get dark out, but man, what would this thing look like if it really was night or almost night? Can you imagine the galactic core rising above the horizon in the middle? And maybe a moon looking over our big blue marble. So advanced. And since I could see that in my head, and as I said before, it was my job to make what was on the computer screen look like what was in my head. Well, I just went out shopping for some of this cool stuff, and yep, there's the galactic core and the Milky Way rising, and there's a moon over to the right, and actually a couple of meteors shelling down there on the right. And with all that light in there, that was be enough to accent the waves and actually make them stand out there. I've in 3 of my pictures tonight, I've dropped in skies that weren't part of the original. And the reason I did that tonight on all of those is I just learned how to do it. And I'll suppose I will satiate my desire to do that and not and not do that to every photo that I take, because that might not be a good idea. In fact, I don't really promote or deride the technique. It's just really another tool that you can add to your bag. But there's a tremendous amount of discussion buzzing online amongst these big guns who are just irate as all get out with some of the companies. First Luminar, and now since Photoshop came out with some stuff. And yeah, they offer a few skies that you can select from, but they also give you ways to import your own skies and to make your own skies part of the game too. The sky is the limit. You can get as crazy or as subtle as you want with this stuff. It's a creative venture. It can be dramatic. It can be subtle and soft. You aren't stuck with the stuff they have, because you get to adjust every single part and parcel of those things. So if you bring in one of their skies, you can make it look different than what they gave you. If you go online, you'll see the arguments that fly back and forth about the all the hard work that these pros do to get a dramatic thing, and then somebody comes in and drops a sky in 2 minutes. They feel really cheated and are really quite angry about the whole thing and are trashing these companies right and left. So it's an interesting time to be alive.
I might say, from a club standpoint in our competition, that if you do this, an image like this would need to be entered in probably the creative category. And in our creative category, the images that you drop in don't they need to be, Jeannie, you correct me if I'm wrong, they need to be images that you took?
Not anymore.
No, I think Steve's right. As long as the original image is your image, like, let's assume that this was Steve's image and he took the image, the raw image, he could put in anything that he wanted to that he got from wherever. However, saying that, if we enter it in any of the PSA competitions, they require every part of the image to be actually photographed by you. So we could never enter this in PSA for sure. But in our club, it's acceptable.
It's acceptable.
Not in PJ and not in nature.
Well, right, definitely not in nature, because you can't change nature. That's against our
So
rules.
you could enter this in open, or you could enter it in creative. What about scapes?
Mono, maybe if it was mono.
What about scapes? Could it with this much?
I
But
think
then,
so.
if there was all of this not taken by the photographer, it's against the PSA rules. So the inter-club competition that we use, we couldn't use it in that.
And I will say that I think some judges may recognize it as an altered image, to the point that they might score it better if it was in creative than if it was in one of the other categories. So just throwing that out there.
I think I hear a personal opinion coming out. And that's what it's really about, is that there's a lot of opinion in the whole world about everything, and photography is just one more place for a lot of discussion.
So any comments, questions on this group of images?
Steve, do you use Luminar 4 for your skies?
Yeah.
That's what I thought. I thought I recognized this one in particular. And Russ, did you use those those sun rays you put in yours, what kind of software did you use for that?
That was Luminar 4 also.
Was it? Okay.
In fact, I didn't have Luminar 4 until Steve told me how easy it was to pop in a sky.
Yeah, I've been using it too for skies. It's amazing.
And I went out and purchased it. I was wrestling with sky replacements and Affinity where, you know, you had to do the selections and masking. And so, and the lightning, and this one, the lightning and the birds are also from Luminar 4. So
Let me throw in one more comment about this. Look at the edges of all that and how that sky is behind there, and all those colors are accurate behind those trees coming through the slots, and how perfectly it lines up with the horizon line and out there. And you would think that one would have to take a lot of effort and time to get such a nice thing. To drop in a sky on Luminar 4 is, after you've done a couple of them, 3 minutes.
Yeah.
at the most.
Is Luminar, is that something that's, I mean, I guess I've never used it. So is it like a Lightroom replacement, or is it specific to skies, or what?
They're morphing from Luminar's 1, 2, 3, and 4 to Luminar AI is coming out and be shipping in December. And they're taking it to yet another level. And the whole artificial intelligence thing, which I've written about a little bit in Lights and Shadows, is it's like having a car with 6,000 horsepower, or dialing it back to 1/10 of a horsepower. It gives you choice to go as crazy or as little as you want, but it makes the statement that in the world of professionals, they don't have a lot of time for extended edits. So they're trying to make it so it's fast. And they've done it.
Does it do everything that Lightroom does, or?
No, it could be a replacement, but it also runs as a plug-in, which is the way I do it.
Yeah, that's what I do too. Jen, it's pretty easy. If you move, you're probably moving pictures from Lightroom into Photoshop, you make adjustments and you bring it back. You can do it the same way in Luminar.
Absolutely.
And Jim, to answer your
Or
question,
Topaz, I mean, I use Topaz all the time, but I have not succumbed to Luminar yet.
Just
It's
money.
well worth getting. It's got some nice features, especially the sky.
Jim?
I use their Aurora, the Aurora HDR for HDR, which is the same company, Skylum, but yeah.
And Jim, to further answer your question, the sun in Luminar with the augmented sky, I believe it's called, I popped the sun in, but I put it below the horizon, so the sun didn't actually show.
Okay.
But I could still bring the sun rays out across the water at the bottom. So
were the sun rays part of the sky replacement?
no, it was part of placing the sun image.
Oh, I see. Okay, got it.
Right.
I like
there's a sun ray. If you pop a sun into the sky, you can do the rays and control the length and color and so on.
Okay. So I haven't done that yet. I'll have to investigate that. I like the looks.
Okay.
So for the big reveal, I guess we need a drum roll. Who supplied the images? Got to thank Jeannie for that. So she sent us a really nice selection. I think it was a dozen, wasn't it, Jean? And I had trouble picking them out, so I finally had my wife go through them, and she decided which ones we should use. So any further questions, comments?
Can I talk a little bit about those?
Yes.
The raw images?
Please do.
Go back and show me the first raw. I'll just tell you a little bit about where I took them and why. I think the raw images, all of them look kind of dull to me. Like,
Why don't you go to the slide that had all 4 images on it?
There we go.
There we go.
this first one over, all of these were taken, this one, the second one here, the mountain was taken in Colorado, but the rest of them were taken on the West Coast on the trip that we took. 2018, we took our travel trailer and loaded up and took off, and we were gone about 6 weeks. This first one was taken in the Palouse, the barn, and I was drawn to the same thing that Russ was drawn to, all of you actually. I like the lines, and I didn't like the fence either, Russ. You said you didn't like the fence line in there, and you know, I guess if it was a nicer looking fence, would have been all right. But for those of you who were guessing when it was taken, it probably was about 9 or 10 in the morning. You were guessing maybe at night. And I also like the telephone poles, although that one telephone pole does kind of stand out to me. But there's telephone poles all the way down the road because it's well away from the city. So from there, we went on to the West Coast, way over to the coast. And these last two were taken in Olympic National Park. There was a couple of lots of different little state parks, or I don't know what you call them, beaches, I guess. There's about 4 or 5 of them along there. The one on the bottom left, for those of you who know me, I have a bit of arthritis and I have some back problems, and there was about a gazillion steps to get here. I said to my husband, what am I going to do? Look at all of these steps. It's even as bad going down as coming up, but I decided I couldn't let this go. And I did go all the way down the gazillion steps. Had a hard time getting back up the gazillion steps, but I had to do it. And what I liked about this was the stones in the front, how it led into the scene. And this one also was about 9 or 10 in the morning. Who thought it was later in the day?
Well, we made it late in the day.
I guess that's true. But I see it as a lot more color than what this raw image shows, but perhaps that's how I remember seeing it. Like Steve was explaining, what you see in your eyes is not exactly what you get on the camera. And
But the data is there.
Right. The bottom right was also taken at a different spot along the Washington coast. I like the trees, and I'm mesmerized by waves. I took 100 of these probably, and I like the different wave action of it. This one I didn't have to go down any steps though, thankfully. The top one was taken at Rocky Mountain National Park. I believe that was on our way home, the same trip. We came by that way. I believe it's at Bear Lake, and I'm not 100% sure, but I'm thinking I took this right at sunrise. I know I was there at sunset and I was there at sunrise, but for some reason, I think this was a sunrise photo just as the sun was coming up. I didn't like the rock in the front left. I'm not sure I liked all of these trees, bushes in the front, but you guys all left them in.
Good foreground interest.
So you all did an excellent job. They're all different. And I'm just amazed at what you did with them. I only work with Lightroom and Photoshop. I don't have any add-ons at this point.
Well, it's all doable within Photoshop. It's just harder. I want to make a point about the Bear Lake photo there. Do all of you see some of the orange red in some of those pine trees on the right side? That is what, now I grew up in Colorado until I was 22. That's beetle kill. For over a decade, maybe 2 decades, beetle kill has been decimating the forests in Colorado. And recently they had the two biggest forest fires that they've ever had. And my sister lives on the side of a mountain overlooking Grand Lake, which is just across the Continental Divide from Estes Park, straddling Rocky Mountain National Park. And in fire that was there, they have their log home, which they built, and another one which they built. That's what they did for a living, is build really nice log homes. Both homes were destroyed in the recent fire within the last month. They lost everything that they ever had. And they had about 12 hours before they had to get out. And it came across the top of the mountains at over 60 to 70 miles an hour. It was like standing right behind a running jet engine. And in no time at all, the whole area was gone. It jumped the Colorado Divide where there is nothing to burn. Continental Divide, because it blew the cinders across the top and started the trees on the other side.
So how is Rocky Mountain, did it survive the fire?
It had some damage, but they got a nice convenient snowstorm. It was pretty heavy, slowed it down enough for the firemen to get in there, and they're still working on getting the last of it put out.
Okay, are there any other questions for the panel? No,
They're all different, aren't they?
they were all very different. It's an interesting challenge. Might
So
be.
I
It was
do
a
have,
lot of fun. It was a lot of fun.
I do have this one slide, and you know, since we are all kind of struggling with things to do with COVID, if anybody would like to do something similar, it could be in mono, could be in portraits, naturescapes, whatever. You know, feel free to send me an email, and we can arrange another one of these, and you know, maybe take the place of a workshop or something by doing it. So if you are interested, you know, contact me, or you contact Jeannie or Jan, and we could kind of go from there. So, but
I could see a competition category, pictures by edited by someone else.
yeah, that would be fun also. So I want to thank you, Gene. You know, it was really fun. So, and just one more quote. I just picked this one up the other day I was watching a YouTube video on editing. When it comes to editing, anything you do with your photos is your choice. It's your art, it's your photo, do what you want. So anyway, that's it. Thank you, guys. So.
All right.
Thank you, all three of you.
All right, I'm gonna stop the recording here.